Okay, let me try.
Yeah.
Naper Anil, and I don't know how to say you're listening to. Let's skip that. Let's not use that. It's fine, man. I tried. So my name is Anil, and you're listening to Just Baate.
I'm a fool for your love.
Hey guys, welcome back to Just Baate. My name is Aswin. Praatibh is unfortunately not here today because he's sick. And it's really unfortunate because I know how much these kind of episodes mean to us. And I'm not going to put words in his mouth, so I'm going to talk about myself. I know that I have spoken about mental health and I've spoken very personally about what I've gone through, what I go through, and how I've come out of it. And I also know Prathip has, and we've just become a lot more comfortable in terms of talking about mental health and talking about getting into that personal space. Also, we have had multiple episodes regarding mental health. We have had a psychologist on talking about her life and digressing into subjects and possible solutions. I know she wouldn't want me to say that, but yeah, possible solutions. And we have had an episode where we brought on a mental health organization from back in India and talked about how much progress they have made in terms of making sure people have counselors and therapists at their doorstep. So check those episodes out if you want. But today's episode and today's guest is someone I really wanted to talk to for a very long time because he's a big supporter about talking about mental health, talking about what he's gone through, and he's raised so much awareness and collaborated with charity. So back in Australia, when he used to work and study, he was part of Beyond Blue, which is a mental health organization. And then he came to the UK and raised money for a charity called Movember. I'm sure you've heard of it. And ran a total of 465 kilometers in the month of November. We'll get into why and what he did. But yes, Anil, thank you so much for joining in.
No, thank you. What an introduction, mate. I definitely didn't expect something so nice, but thank you for the kind words. I'm super excited to speak to you as well.
Thank you so much. Now, before we get into your journey and experience and everything, we have an icebreaker for you. So,
Sure.
I know you're an Arsenal fan with whatever research that I did. Are you an Arsenal fan?
I am. I
Yeah.
definitely am. I was
And
at the game last night, actually.
oh,
So
really?
most definitely an
But didn't they
Arsenal.
lose? I must.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. Let's not talk about that. That creates some of my own mental health challenges watching them sometimes,
Right.
but it's fine.
And I also know, I mean, I'm assuming you still follow hockey because back in Australia, you did follow hockey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So one of my best friends plays hockey. So yeah, I followed a
Ah,
fair bit as well. Yeah.
now, because Prathib and I mean, no, I wouldn't call ourselves narcissistics, but we are biggest cricket fans and we have a separate cricket channel. So
Yeah.
that's a way to plug it in. But do you follow cricket? Have you followed cricket? Have you played the game?
I used to play cricket when I was little.
Mm-hmm.
So I played from like 10 till maybe like 17, 18.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I played a fair bit when I
Right.
was in Australia. I was
Mm-hmm.
quite into it. I was
Mm-hmm.
very torn having just moved to Australia at
Right.
that ripe age where you have to kind of choose who you're going to follow. So it was always like India versus Australia was always tough. But yeah, I'm quite into my cricket as well.
That's good to know. That we always like a cricket fan of someone who's played the game. But yeah, talking about your journey and what you've gone through, I know you've talked about mental health a lot,
Yeah.
but at what age did you realize that mental health is something to think about, not just talk about, but like at what age? I mean, so personally, when I went through whatever I went through when I was 16, 17, I didn't really know what I'm going through. I didn't really
Yeah.
understand it. So at what age did you realize that mental health is something important to think about?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Look, I kind of broke this down, and I think this month in particular has been
Mm-hmm.
really helpful for me to reflect on,
Right.
I guess, my whole
Yeah.
life,
Mm-hmm.
and also kind of my mental health journey, as I'm kind of calling it at the moment. I think similar to you, when I was kind of in my teens, I knew I had something going on. I didn't know what it was. It's kind of really challenging to put together how you're feeling and why you're feeling it together. I think in my 20s, when I knew I was kind of more going through some stuff, I knew it was something I needed to address, but I didn't know how. And I
Yeah.
think only recently, only in the last maybe couple of years, have I figured
Really?
out, right,
Mm-hmm.
this is something I'm going through. It's something I'm going to go through for the rest of my life. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm cured or anything like that. But
Yeah.
only now have I really realized it's something I need to speak about. It's something I need to address. I need to be active about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a passive thing that I can say, it's finished, it's in my past or anything like that. So it's only been very recently. And I think even that being said, I'll probably keep evolving.
Right,
Maybe
yeah,
in
of
my
course.
40s,
Yeah.
whatever, I'll get more comfortable with my mental
Mhm.
health. I'll be able to kind of address it quicker or whatever it is as well. So I think it's this graph of basically me getting more comfortable and then me
Mhm.
knowing what I need to do and kind of talking about it as well.
Now, when you didn't know what you were going through or knew that there was something in your mind, you have also openly spoken about how you have had suicidal thoughts and
Yeah.
different and felt depressed and everything. How has your coping mechanism changed from when you were a teen as compared to now? Did you
Mm,
do anything differently? So when you had these suicidal thoughts, what did you do back then as compared to what do you do now to make yourself feel
yeah.
better?
Yeah, that's a good question as well, actually. I think in my teens, I it was more, I was just an angry kid, man. I was just like,
Right.
typical. I think I was kind of disassociating myself from my parents a bit. I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to move away from I just want to do something else. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
play sport
Right.
or want to go out of the house or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
was. And it was more like an escape rather than trying to deal with it. I just wanted to keep myself
Yeah.
distracted. And I think a lot of teens probably would
Yeah.
relate to that
Mm-hmm.
as well. Look, in my 20s, I think I so I used to DJ, so I used to party a lot. I used to be out and about a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And the big thing was it was another escape. I used to drink a lot,
Right.
just kind of social. I was never like an alcoholic as such, but I used to drink a fair
Right.
bit. And that was my escape in that
Mm-hmm.
period. So it just meant that a part of what I did was go out, which meant I'd basically drink. And I think I put myself in some really compromising positions in my 20s. I
Mm-hmm.
think when I said I had suicidal thoughts, it was less like, I think the best way of putting it is I wasn't courageous enough to do something to end my life, but I didn't have the courage to live my life either. It was somewhere in
Right.
the middle. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was very, um, I just didn't know how to continue
Mm-hmm.
basically, but I didn't know how to kind of end things either. I used to drink and drive, which I know is probably the worst thing I ever did
Mm-hmm.
because not only put myself at risk, but a lot of other
Yeah.
people on the road, etc. I think you don't think about these things when you're in the moment. I think it's really, really,
Yeah.
it's sad, but it's just what it
Yeah.
is. But yeah, I think only now have I realized of how to kind of get through that. And I think my coping mechanisms have kind of evolved as
Mm-hmm.
well. I think now I know what I need to do is kind of create some space for myself rather than trying to escape from it.
Right.
Look, some days it's still really hard you can't just tackle it head on. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to get out of bed and feel like, right, I'm going to do these 5 things and I'm going to feel good.
Yeah.
But I recognize that some days are not good and
Mm-hmm.
I accept it. I try and do the basics, get through that day, and then just try and take small steps
Right.
going forward as well. So yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful how far you've come because you can acknowledge it. Like, I'll be honest with you, even today morning was difficult for me. I had to tell
Yeah.
myself that I have to get this. Because, to be fair, without Praatibh, it's just a little more tougher for me. Because if, like, my co host name is Praatibh, and when
Yeah.
he's there, I know that I'm liable to someone. And when he's
Yes.
not, I'm just, it's just
Yeah.
difficult.
It's interesting that you say that actually, because I think there is something very nice in having someone that you can depend on or
Yeah.
someone that's going to kind of motivate you to
Mm-hmm.
get through things. And in my 20s, I definitely did have someone that I used to depend on,
Right.
and I was in a long-term relationship. And, one of the reasons I went through a lot of stuff this year is that ended in a
Mm-hmm.
pretty abrupt way, unfortunately. But I think being accountable to yourself is really, really important as well. I think you need to just create that balance.
Yeah.
It's great to have something external,
Yeah.
but also, you know, everyone's kind of unique in that they bring something special to other people in their lives. I think
Mm-hmm.
just as much as you're accountable to other people, I think it's nice to be kind of accountable
That's
to
true.
yourself and
Yes.
make yourself happy as well.
Yeah.
So I think even in one of the articles that I wrote, I mentioned that for me, balance and kind of self-care is really
Mm-hmm.
important because I
Mm-hmm.
think those things can just make you happy rather than looking for it externally as well.
Yep.
I'm a big external
Oh yeah,
energy
same,
person as
same,
well. So
yeah, same. I was actually going to touch upon your relationship, but before that, you did talk about your parents. Now you've told me that you were born in Hyderabad, you were brought up in
yeah,
Hyderabad, and I know. I mean, I'm not stereotyping anyone, but I just know
yeah.
it's a little difficult to explain what mental health is like back home.
Oh,
And
100%.
yeah, and I was going to ask you, when was it that you bought? So when did you first bring the topic up about mental
Yeah.
health to your parents, and how did that go? How did that conversation go?
Wow. This is quite an interesting topic because my dad
Mhm,
is like one of the hardest working people that I know.
mhm.
Like, I think my work ethic and all that sort of stuff comes from him. Both my parents are, you know, immigrants from India, moved
Right.
to Australia with very little, really did well for themselves. And I think I've got some great morals and kind of my drive from
Mhm.
both of them. But my dad doesn't understand the concept of stress. So when I say the word, like, how do you not feel stressed when you've got so much going on? He's like, that's just a made up word. It doesn't mean anything.
Oh,
Then
right.
I have to tell him, like, then I have to do the typical Indian thing and say, well, what about your blood pressure? Your BP, does it go high? Does it, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
yeah,
then
yeah.
he's like, yeah, but it's fine.
Mhm.
But I felt like it was very difficult for me to have a conversation with my parents to explain what it is, because I think it's been not something that they have focused on
Right.
ever in
Yeah.
their life.
Mm-hmm.
I think making that connection has been really, really difficult. I'm super lucky because my sister and I are very close,
Right.
and she kind of tried to take a lot more of a active role in understanding what I was going through, especially in my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
which was great. But I never had an open conversation with my parents actually about it
To date?
till no till date. Yeah, not even at the moment. So I was on GB News
Yeah.
earlier in the month, and I sent the link to my parents, and that's probably the first time they would have ever heard me say some of those words as well, like that plainly.
Right.
Um, but look, I know they support me and everything,
Uh-huh.
but this connection is really difficult to make, I think,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I mean, I don't think so. I've thought about this as well, and I don't think I can ever blame them because they come from a generation where they've been told to get on with it.
100%.
And
Yeah.
that's inevitably that's what they'll pass on to us as well. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I've had parents who do support me now. They've took
Yeah.
their time to understand it. A lot of people think that something big needs to happen for you to feel a certain way. Like
Yeah.
for me, it was something that took a lot of things happen over the years for me to
Yeah.
feel a certain way. So what was it for you? Was it one big situation or consequence that made you feel a certain way, or was it a lot of things that accumulated?
Yeah. I think definitely mine is kind of cumulative
Mm-hmm.
situations. I've had a lot of like life events happen, and
Mm-hmm.
individually, I feel like, they've had significant impacts, but it's really just one after another of things. Like in between when I was like maybe 14 till 16, or maybe like 13 till 16, 17, my parents wanted me to get into a particular private school.
All right. Mm-hmm.
And I missed out by like a few marks, which was really unfortunate. That was a bit of a hit. And then it was just little things. I kept feeling like I was a bit of a failure, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then only now have I been able to like look back at periods of my life and understand that's why I felt that way
Mm-hmm.
for that time. And then I had similar sort of experiences in my 20s at work, whereas I felt like I was on a really good trajectory work career wise. And then I had a couple of things that didn't work out like back to back. And then I
Right.
was like, right, my career is not going how I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But really externally, it was still going very, really
Right.
well. But
Right.
I just felt like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't. And it's just that. I think that's what really kind of got to me. It wasn't one big event.
Do you think in your 20s, because you were in such a long-term relationship and because you're someone who wants that external support,
Yeah.
do you think you couldn't ever think for yourself, if that makes sense, or couldn't ever make yourself feel better without that external one?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that was probably, something that I'm coming to terms with more now,
Right.
knowing that I need to kind of make myself happy
Mm-hmm.
in, I guess, as a core before anyone else can
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
add to my
Mm-hmm.
happiness. Um, I think I'm super grateful for the relationship I have, regardless of how things panned out. But at the same time, I know that I let a lot of things affect me, and I just couldn't get out of some mental health, like mental spaces more than
Right.
anything else,
Yeah.
because if I felt really down, it was
Mm-hmm.
really tough for me, and I needed, um, someone else to kind of help me move on from that or talk me through it, etc. But now I feel like it takes a long time, man. This, very similar to what I was saying. It's like, it's just a journey that you're on. And at some point, things start to feel like, right, okay, I've got some of my own strategies at
Mm-hmm.
work, but my mental health journey has been 20 plus years now, and I feel like I've got another how many of 50 years to go, hopefully, whatever it is. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I was gonna say it's just simply incredible that it's been 20 plus years and you've been going on. I wanted to emphasize while introduction of how even though you have gone through your adversities, the important bit is you have gone through it and you're
Yeah.
able to get past it. And I've read this somewhere, but I just wanted to confirm you've also started going to therapy, right? Or you were going
Yeah.
to therapy. So
Yeah.
what was that like for yourself? Because I know it was, I mean, I brought it up with my parents because I was dependent on them at that time. I mean, I still
Yeah.
am. But
Yeah.
while talking to them about going to therapy, it was difficult, but I also had to adjust it to myself because I first had to be ready to open up to a stranger and then
Yeah.
talk about my vulnerabilities and what causes pain and whatever.
Yeah.
So how was that like for you, that process of talking to a therapist?
Yeah. It was so a couple of things. One, I actually in my kind of mid 20s, my dad actually had a heart attack, and it was very touch and go. I had to perform kind of basic first aid to make sure he was staying alive until the ambulances came, etc. It was quite like a big traumatic event that happened in my life. And then just after that, actually, I realized, right, I need some sort of counseling or therapy or whatever. And I used just through my work, they had an employee assistance program. So I saw a counselor for maybe like half a dozen sessions. And I think at that point, it was just to unload what I was going through. I had so much going on in my life. That whole thing with my parents, I think I transitioned into a bit more of like a parental role while my dad was getting better. Being a mid-20s guy, I think you're taking on so much responsibility is quite tough. And it was quite interesting because at that point, my counselor was like, hey, you're going to have to go on some medication. I think that's your best route.
Right.
And as soon as I got on the medication, I thought, I'm going to be better in 6 months or 12 months, whatever it is. I'm getting the magic pill. And then I kind of took my foot off the counseling, etc. And then I realized how much I needed it only when I started going back this year. I think to your point, opening up to a stranger can feel really odd, but it's also really freeing because you can say anything to this person, man, and they're never going to firstly judge you. Keeping in mind they're probably dealing with other people who are going through
and there's
way
no past
more.
baggage of sorts.
Exactly. And I think my counselor in particular, they're all different, by the way. You see it in the TV shows where you're lying on a couch. I don't think that actually ever happens. It's just a normal room. But when you speak to them, sometimes they do come out with like really thought-provoking questions, and that you feel like, wow, they're really helping solve whatever I'm going through. But sometimes, for me in particular, it's just the best is I have my conversation, and being able to like verbalize what I'm thinking is probably the most important thing. And I feel like that helps within itself. So I feel like I'm not quite an overthinker, but I've just got a lot in my mind. And getting through that process once a week. So I go to counseling once a week, and I have been this whole year. I don't know if I'll, for the foreseeable future, I don't see it stopping. I'm like, this is great. And the other good thing is I'm actually really open with it. So all my friends know Friday afternoons is my thing. I go to a counselor. It's my decompression for the week. Sets me up for the weekend. And that's life for me at the moment.
Oh, that's so beautiful. The way you put it, it sounds really nice. How you go Friday afternoon and then you have the weekend for yourself. Was it difficult to talk about it with your friends?
With some, yes. Because I think there's a level of not judgment, but people do think like, oof, you must have something going on, because if you're seeing a counselor so regularly. But I think what's interesting is everyone's got something going on. It's just how you're dealing with it. And I think, look, if you're not feeling well, you'd go to a doctor. If you're, playing cricket and you're always getting bowled out, of course you're going to go see a coach. I think it's the same sort of concept is if you're not doing or feeling your best, you should go see someone about it. And I feel like life is hard, man. It's not easy.
Yeah, but that's such a beautiful analogy. I think we'll just put a snippet of this on Instagram because that's such a beautiful way to put it. I've never thought of it that way, but yes, that is so true. Now I know before we get into the challenge that you did in November, were you always a runner? Was that something you always?
Yeah. So actually, now that you mentioned, like, I followed a bit of the hockey. So my
Mhm.
friend used to play hockey
Mhm.
at quite a kind of elite level. So I used to kind of go running with him, and I was terrible. This was kind of 12, 15 years ago. So I've always enjoyed running, but I
Mhm.
think only in the maybe last 4 or 5 years have I really just started to do it on my own.
Mhm.
And then only through COVID have I like really used it as a way to kind of unwind and create some
Right.
space for myself as well.
Mhm. But I don't know if you have, but have you ever used that to punish yourself in a sense? Because I know I fell in love with going to the gym 5 years ago. And there
Okay.
came a point where I was not feeling well, but I went to the
Yeah.
gym just because I knew I wouldn't think about anything and I wanted to
Yeah.
feel something physically
Yeah.
and whatever. But yeah, have
Yeah.
you ever used running to punish yourself in that way?
100%. And it's interesting that you use that word because that is exactly how my running was earlier this year.
Oh,
So
really?
actually what's really interesting is my relationship with running has completely evolved this year.
Mm-hmm.
So at the start of the year, I was not in a really good headspace. I basically used to run, 3, 4 times a week, but it was
Right.
like every time I ran, I had to, like you said, absolutely punish myself. Like I had to be faster, I had to be better, I had to be go longer distances. There was no rest for the body. And to your point, I needed to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
There was no enjoyment in it at all.
Oh,
It was
really?
basically yeah, I'd like if I ran 10Ks on Monday
Mm-hmm.
and I did it in whatever, let's say 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And if day two, like Tuesday, I would go out for a run again, no rest, obviously. And then I'd just be like, I have to run faster. I have to be better than 45 minutes. And if I wasn't, I'd go out on Wednesday and be like, okay, got to be better than I was yesterday. And it
Right.
was just constant.
Mm-hmm.
But that I think I was looking for a sense of like accomplishment. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to feel confident about myself. I wanted to be better than who I was the day before. And I realized I was also doing that with like when I went cycling or whatever. It was just how can I be better,
Yeah.
regardless of how tired I got, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think having done the November challenge, my relationship has completely changed where I just run because I enjoy it. And
Mm-hmm.
if I stop to take a couple of photos or if I stop to have a drink of water or whatever, I don't think anything
Right.
of it. It's
Yeah.
just I get out, I enjoy it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's beautiful. Nothing else.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. I'm so glad you've come this way. I think you should really be proud of yourself, even with what you're saying. It's a very big accomplishment that goes understated. But talking about the Movember challenge itself for the viewers and listeners, can you explain what the challenge itself was?
Yeah, of course. And I think we've kind of probably created some good context for me to
Yeah.
explain it as
Yeah.
well. So basically, I did, as you said, I ran 465 kilometers
Mm-hmm.
in November, and it was in 1 kilometer increments. So on day one, I ran 1K, day two, 2Ks, 3Ks, etc., all the way to 30. And I think the reason I kind of set this challenge up this way is to really highlight that if you don't kind of address the things you're going through, that
Mhm.
build up is going to be at some point be the camel.
Yeah.
Sorry, the straw that broke the camel's back,
Yeah.
basically. I think a lot of people take on one, two, three things in their life, but then at some point you need to have a kind of conversation about it. So yeah, and it's quite interesting. I wanted people to run with me as
Mhm.
well as kind of raising money for November. I wanted to just have a conversation with people as I ran, understand what they're going through, or just listen to my story or whatever, and just
Mhm.
I guess show a bit of vulnerability to invite some conversation as well. So that was basically my challenge for November.
And how did that go about? Because I mean, you could be a runner, but to run every day for 30 days can be a
Yeah,
mental struggle itself. So
yeah,
was there a day when you didn't want to do it, but you had to force yourself to do it?
yeah. Look, there were a couple of days. I think firstly, knowing my own physical abilities, I
Mhm.
knew that maybe to like middle of November, I knew that I would get there okay. It was
Right.
definitely the second half of
Right.
November was going to be a real challenge. And
Mhm.
just to put some numbers out there, I think in the last 10 days, I ran 240 kilometers, give or take. So it's,
Whoa. Oh yeah, yeah.
the way it was compounding, it
Yeah.
was the last 10 days were just brutal.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I think day 29, like physically and mentally, was probably my hardest.
Mhm.
I ran with a really good friend of mine, Sam. He supported me and he was unbelievable. Kind of in the last 10 days,
Mhm.
but it was great because he basically did the route, set the pace, did everything. All I needed to do was meet him, run, and then he
Right.
would create the route to come back to my
Mhm.
house. But man, I hated 90% of that run. It was just so tough, and I just wanted it to finish. And like you said, that mental challenge of like, it was just brutal. But funnily enough, my favorite day was day 30, and I actually ran that alone.
And that was right the
And
next day, right?
yeah, exactly. So
Right.
after I just hated the run on day 29, I ran day 30.
Were you
And
nervous before the 30th run?
I was, and I think one thing that's worth mentioning is, so the most I'd ever run before that was a half marathon. So I'd run 21 Ks
Right.
is the most I'd ever
Mhm.
run. So every day after day 22 was going to be the most I'd ever run at that point.
Right.
So by the time I got to day 30, I never ran that distance, I think. But mentally, I already spoke to myself and was like, I just want to enjoy today, and I want to enjoy everything I've done for this month. And I think the headspace you're in obviously really impacts how well you run or how good you feel. And I think day 29, I was just like, I just want this to finish. I don't want to do it. And day 30, I was like, I can't believe this is finishing. And I actually, at about 16 kilometers in, I thought, wow, I only have 12 kilometers left. And I was sad. I could not believe it. And I felt like I needed to soak in the atmosphere. Like I sent a couple of messages to like my sister and one of my best friends, and just kind of wanted to share that moment with people. And it wasn't about running. It was
Right.
just about doing my own thing. And yeah, I think there was something really beautiful for me on that last day, actually, that I'll never forget. It was probably one of the most special days.
That is so beautiful to hear, and I'm so glad that you did that alone. I mean, the 30th day run, I feel like it's a lot more special because you did it by yourself. Because the idea of doing this month was your idea.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
do that alone, I mean, again, I'm going to talk about myself because
No, of course.
I feel like, so I think I was in 12th grade when I was going to stop cricket for a while. So I wanted to
Right.
be a cricketer. That was the big goal. And I think in 12th grade was when I was at my lowest. And so I decided one day, I had a match, and I decided that this is going to be it. Like after this match, I'm not going to play the game for at least a year or two because I'm going to take a big break. And so I'm not going to get into the match. But when I went into bat, I just felt so free. I just felt like this is it. It's me. I like batting. And if it's going to be my last time I'm going to bat, let's just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And I got my highest ever score that I've had.
Wow.
Yeah, in my 12 years of playing cricket, I had my highest score. And like you said, I just lived in that moment and felt like I just love batting, and let's just enjoy it. But
Yeah.
you did the Movember challenge especially because to talk about men's mental health.
Yeah.
And why was it important for you to do that? Is it because you came from a family where it was difficult to do so, or were you around friends who I mean, you saw that it was tough for men to talk about mental
Yeah.
health and what they went through?
I think it's a combination of things. I think firstly, I think culturally there's a big thing for me. I think, as you touched on, like being Indian, I think, and I don't know about your parents, and I don't want to kind of make any assumptions as well, like you said, but I was compared at every age group for everything I did. I had to be better than my next door neighbor at school. I had to be better than whoever I was playing with.
Do you
cricket,
think that also reflected on how you started running, how you wanted to be better than the day before?
100%, 100%. I think the drive that gives you when you're constantly being compared to other people, it just puts so much pressure on you as well. And I think that naturally that subsided to some degree. Like I stopped comparing myself to other people. I was just like, I need to be better than whoever I was yesterday. And as much as that's good, it's still not good, because I think what you lose is just living in the moment. I could have said to myself, okay, day 29, I ran it in 2 hours, 55 minutes, whatever. Okay, the next day I want to be a bit faster. But instead of doing that, I was like, I actually just want to enjoy it. And funnily enough, that was my second fastest run, was my 30-kilometer day.
Really?
After day 20, that was my second fastest. So,
Wow.
which, like you said, once you kind of let that feeling go, or that pressure, and you just feel free, I think you just get into the zone and living in the moment is such a cliche thing to say, but I think something clicks and you feel like, yeah, I can just do this.
Yeah. You feel a lot more lighter if that
Oh,
makes, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I think, sorry, going back to your question more around like men's mental health in particular as well, I think it is really important. Most of the people I ran were with men. I think men in particular. So actually, Movember does this, has just started this program called Shoulder to Shoulder, or
Right.
Shoulder. But basically, it's men don't like to make eye contact when they're talking about their feelings. It's a little bit easier when they're sitting next to each other. So perfect example would be, let's say you go to a cricket match with someone, you're sitting next to them, you might be at a pub sitting next to them. It's a lot easier to kind of look at other things in the world and speak about your feelings. So I think that worked out really well. I spoke to a few guys, and some of the guys that I spoke to had gone through things in their past. I think when I spoke about what I was going through, they were able to kind of connect with it as well. The other element that's really interesting and important to me as well was people that are supporting people with mental health issues. So as an example, my sister didn't have heaps of resources to help or know what I was going through, basically. So I think, through the month of November, I had heaps of friends who are women who've got boyfriends or partners or husbands, whatever. And they were always like, hey, I know my husband's going through something. I don't know how to connect with him. Reading your article kind of sparked some conversation. How do you go about going to therapy, whatever? And I think that was really important because for me, we have to kind of tackle this from multiple angles for men's mental health. It's not like I come to you and say, hey, Aswin, let's talk about your mental health. It's not that easy. It's not such a one-to-one conversation, unfortunately. So I think that's really important for me as well.
I mean, kudos to you, because I feel like that's one angle that people don't necessarily talk about, on how to go about helping someone who's going through something. Now, you did touch upon this. You did tell me that you sent that GB News link to your parents.
Yes.
That's the first time they saw you talk about it so openly. What was the next conversation? How did that feel?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was very surprised. My mum watched it live, and then my dad watched the YouTube link like a little bit later, maybe a couple of days later. And when my mum watched it, she actually said, this is going to be really helpful for your dad. And it was very interesting because then it made me think, I wonder if she meant that from like me opening up about my own challenges and connecting with him. Not that I don't connect with my parents, but on another level, I wonder if it's going to make him think about his own mental health a little bit as well. And now, like, my parents are actually currently in India on a holiday. And when I speak to them, I can be a bit more open about, hey, this is causing me stress because you guys are going through, you're doing so much stuff, whatever it is. And I feel like they try and connect a bit more on that, which is really, really good. So I think our subsequent conversations are still not like really deep about mental health, but I think they've taken a step forward as well. And, it's probably a very small step. And like you said, they've been conditioned to be like this for generations. But I think it's a good direction to be in.
But I mean, it's a step, and that's so beautiful. Oh, that's so sweet of your mom. That's really nice. Now, you also told me, I mean, in the mail that you sent, you spoke about how you have future projects regarding. I was going to ask you about that, because you've done this. You've done the Movember challenge. You said that you want to take some time off to reflect. Now you have reflected. Now, what are your plans to continue? Because here's the thing, right? You have no reason to continue to do this. And it shows how good of a human being you are, because you could have done this challenge and then you could have let it slide. And it would have been perfectly fine, because you did what you had to. You raised awareness, you raised the money, you did the whole challenge. But you also want to continue doing things for mental health. So what does that entail?
So firstly, I think there's two things. One is, like you said, this could have been my one thing. I'd do it, move on from it, and feel like I tick a box and, I got a sense of achievement out of it. I feel like I've created a bit of momentum for myself more than anything else. And I've got people talking about mental health. I think that's really important. And I feel like, if I can continue to do something a bit more long-term, I think I want to create like a sustainable conversation. I think that's really, really important. The second thing is, I guess this is more my own personal thing as well. Like I want to move on to something bigger next time. But I'm trying to channel this in the right way. Instead of just being like, next year I'm going to run 600 kilometers or something like that. I mean, I want it to turn into something that's sustainable where I can continue the conversation with more people. If that's maybe I try and link up with a couple of running clubs and continue to have conversations, or more physical fits, whatever it might be. I definitely have a couple of things in mind, but I want to create more conversations like this one, to be honest. I feel like I'm in such a good place with my mental health that I can talk about it. I think there's a lot of people who are really, kind of not even celebrities who talk about their mental health, etc. It's great to hear it, but sometimes I feel like it's a little bit disconnected because I think people can't really relate to that level. So I think it's nice to just have a conversation with normal people where, hey, Anil's gone through this, but he's still got a career, he's still got, a relationship, he's still got family and friends, and he can get on with his life. And I want to encourage more of that as well. So I think I'm really trying to change my attitude of wanting to continue to push myself into something a little bit more positive, and how can I do something a little bit more long term as well. So yeah, I'm still working through exactly what that challenge potentially will look like. But yeah, I think there's like maybe 4 or 5 things that I've come out of this Movember challenge with. It's, the running is one side, the mental health journey is one side, but even creating really good routines. Every day I got up, had like 4 or 5 things I did every morning, how that makes you feel, how that sets you up for your day. Some days when I wasn't feeling great, just doing those 2 or 3 things actually gave me the energy to move on to the next thing. Like there's a lot that I want to talk about. So I think it's how I can basically help people with what they're going through as well.
That is, I mean, I keep saying this, but it is very beautiful, and it's really wholesome that there are people like you out there. You did mention that your sister, I was going to say system, but your sister was a big support system for you in your early years. Have you ever had a conversation where there was a switch where you were her support system and she could open up to you?
It's quite interesting. Look, I think my sister's probably the strongest person I know. I know she's been through a lot herself, and she's had her own kind of challenges, and she has leaned on me for some things. But I feel like in the grand scheme of things, it's probably been like 90% me leaning on her and 10%. She might argue it's not quite that skewed, but I feel like it is. I think naturally, if I can't feel like I'm there to support her as much as she needs, I feel like at least I can try and do that for other people as well. So
yeah, that's true.
It's really a kind of pay it forward element for me. Is she's helped me so much, how can I help other people as well?
We've always asked this because we've always had interesting answers, but what do you think that the 18-year-old you wouldn't like about you right now?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. What would the 18-year-old not like about me now?
Because it doesn't have to be anything negative per se. Like I'll give you an example of me, because the 18-year-old me wouldn't like the fact that I had colored hair, but now I just like doing all of this because I feel like it's a way of expression. So it doesn't have to be a negative trait, but just anything.
Yeah. I think, that's a very good question, man. You really stumped me on it. I definitely think like there's an element of persistence that I felt like I gave up on a few things in my teens. And I still kind of do that to some degree. And I think what you said about this Movember challenge is really interesting, because previously I would have always been like, all right, I've achieved something, and then I finish it, and then I try and move on to something else. And I think that's something that my 18-year-old self still can see that I do now. There's some things in my life I'm like, okay, I've achieved what I wanted, and I don't see it through to the next level. And I think that's where I think true success actually lies, is when you think you've achieved something and then you keep going and then you achieve the next level of it, etc. So that's probably the one thing I'd say.
But do you think you not give up on it, but do you think you move on from it because you're scared that you can't achieve the next level, or you'll fail to achieve?
Yeah, I think that's the big question that I want to try and answer for myself. So
Right.
even when I said like, I DJ'd for a while. So I
Mhm.
actually DJ'd for like 13 years from when I was 17 till I was
Whoa.
29,
Right.
something like that, 29,
Mhm.
30. And I feel like sometimes, why did I kind of stop? Why didn't I keep pushing? Because
Mhm.
I love music. I think you can see I've got a
Yep.
turntable in the
Yep.
background,
Yep.
some records. Like, why did I stop basically? And I wonder if I was scared that I was never going to make it at that level,
Mhm.
the next level, whatever it is,
Yeah.
or if I was genuinely happy with how far I'd gone in that as well. And it's similar. I think this is why my November challenge is really important to me. I feel
Mhm.
like I can't give up now that I've achieved something. It's
Yeah.
how can I see it through until I'm really genuinely content,
Mhm.
or it doesn't work. Failure is actually not a bad thing either.
Well,
Like
of
if I
course
get
not.
to a point where it doesn't work,
Mhm.
I know I tried as far as I could,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anil, thank you so much for giving so much of your time. And
No worries,
I
man. This has
hope
been awesome.
I hope you do achieve what you want to achieve, but I hope you continue learning and grow, because I feel like there are times when you get older. I mean, I'm not saying you, from whatever people I've spoken to, I feel like when they get older, they give up on the idea of growing. And I
Yeah.
don't think that ever stops. So I hope you continue to inspire, because, like, we covered him in City News. So I studied in City University. I've spoken about that before.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people in that newsroom when we saw a package who was so inspired that they have started to run, no jokes, that they have
Yeah.
started to run, started talking about mental health. And now it's a discussion that we have in our newsroom. So,
Right. Okay.
yeah, so I mean, if you could have an impact in that small room, you continue to make an impact throughout the country and the world and whoever's listening and watching. So, yeah. And then,
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think the growth aspect is really, really key to what I'm doing at the moment, because I
yeah.
think I think reflecting on what you've achieved in the past and
Mhm.
then kind of where you're at, that's where your real, that's where your life stories are. Really,
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm really trying to share as well. So no, hey, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Anil. It was really great. Guys, we'll put all of his links in the description below. The GB News link, the articles that he's written, the Movember challenge link in the description below, and his Instagram if he's okay. But yes, we'll
Of
put all of
course.
his link in the description below. So please go check that out, like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. You know what we do. Thank you so much for watching.
Yo, thanks for tuning into the latest episode of Just Batein. We hope you enjoyed it and that it left you inspired. Thanks for all your support, and maybe you could support us just a little more by maybe going to our Instagram and Twitter and giving us a follow there. And also, you can listen to us on all podcasting platforms, right from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to Google Podcasts. Cheers.